I should have left you to freeze. The words left my mouth before I realized what I'd said. Evelyn Hart's eyes went wide, disbelief spilling across her perfectly composed face. Her designer coat was plastered with snow, hair frozen in spikes, and yet her expression wasn't fear. It was shock and something worse, humiliation. I can't, she stammered, voice trembling despite her usual control. You can't make me. I can, I said. Flat, clinical, necessary. The storm outside could kill her. My anger didn't matter. My daughter mattered. Survival mattered. And right now, the wet clothes she clung to were a death sentence. Evelyn froze, the reality of what she'd done and what she'd survived colliding in a storm inside my cabin stronger than the blizzard outside. She was breathing hard, gasping, every breath clouding in the cabin air, and I could feel her pulse in the tension radiating off her. Every instinct told her to fight, but there was nowhere to run. Not tonight, not to the frozen woods, not from the history between us. You're not going to leave me out here, she whispered. Her voice cracked, caught between anger and fear. The words were a plea, a confession, a subtle accusation all at once. I didn't answer. I turned to grab the blankets, thick and warm, and held them out like an ultimatum. Survival had no patience for pride. I didn't care about apologies or justifications. I cared about life. And hers was in my hands. Her eyes flickered to the door behind me, imagining escape into snow that had already claimed the edge of the road, imagining freedom in motion. But the truth was brutal. No one was coming. Not for her. Not tonight. Not until she stepped inside, obeyed, and trusted me, if only for a moment. You saved me, she whispered, the words almost inaudible. No, I corrected her silently. I didn't save her because she was Evelyn Hart, CEO of Apex Solutions, untouchable and relentless. I saved her because a 6-year-old girl, my daughter Emma, would have asked why I let someone die when I could have helped. That alone was enough to keep me human. That alone made the choice simple. Her lips parted. I saw the recognition flash across her face. The woman who fired me, who watched me struggle while my daughter fought for life, who had never once tried to see me as a person rather than a problem. And now, wet, shivering, frozen, she stood in my doorway, stripped of every armor she'd spent a lifetime building. The storm rattled the cabin around us. Branches cracked under the weight of snow. Wind howled like some living thing. Inside, silence stretched, broken only by her ragged breathing and the distant crackle of the fire. I handed her the robe and blankets. Strip, I said again, voice firm, no options, no negotiation. Wet clothes and hypothermia were lethal. Pride couldn't save her. Only compliance and warmth could. She hesitated. Her hands shook as she fumbled with buttons that wouldn't cooperate. I can't, she whispered, eyes brimming with frustration, fear, and fury. I stepped closer, letting her feel the authority of necessity, not anger. Turn around, I said softly, almost gently. Not a choice, not yet. Just life. Her body obeyed with the hesitation of someone unaccustomed to trust. I peeled the soaked coat from her shoulders, letting it drop to the floor with a wet thud. Every movement was deliberate, careful, clinical, but the tension hummed like electricity in the air. Evelyn's breaths were short, rapid, panicked. She was still Evelyn Hart, but she was also entirely human, vulnerable, broken, alive. And I didn't look away. Through the window, the storm raged, snow blinding and white. Inside, the warmth of the cabin began to seep into her frozen skin. Each blanket, each log in the fire, was a small act of mercy, a reminder that humanity could still exist in the aftermath of cruelty. I caught her eye. The first truth had landed. You could have died out there, I said quietly. Do you understand that? Yes, she whispered, shivering. I thank you. No thanks, I interrupted. Do what I say. Survive. That's all that matters right now. Her shoulders sagged, exhaustion mingling with relief. The power imbalance between us, the CEO and the man she'd wronged, still existed, but it no longer mattered. Death had leveled the field. Survival didn't negotiate. And then came the look I knew well. The calculation, the flicker of old authority trying to assert itself, even as every rational thought screamed otherwise. Evelyn Hart, queen of Apex Solutions, had met the edge of her own mortality and found it terrifyingly equal to anyone else's. Her voice shook, fragile but daring. Why are you helping me? I could see the memory of that boardroom in Seattle 6 months ago flicker in her eyes. The firing, the indifference, the cost of ambition. The truth hit her all at once. I wasn't helping because she was brilliant or rich. I was helping because a little girl I loved would have asked me why I didn't. That was the only explanation that mattered. "You've got a lot to answer for," she said quietly, the words laced with awe, guilt, and disbelief. "Yes," I said. And survival doesn't wait for apologies. Quote, her eyes narrowed, brimming with storm-level intensity, and for a heartbeat, the world outside could have been anything. The blizzard, the deathly cold, the snow, all irrelevant. All that mattered was the collision of past betrayals, frozen pride, and the raw, undeniable fact that right now she depended on me entirely. And I had no choice but to answer. The first moral ultimatum had landed, and part 1 ends here. Who survives is clear, who will forgive, and how is not. The snowstorm outside had barely slowed when Evelyn Hart finally sank onto the floor near the fire, wrapped in the thick blankets I'd handed her. Her teeth were still chattering, but for the first time she wasn't fighting the reality of being vulnerable. "I need to know," she started hesitantly, voice low, "why you didn't just leave me out there." I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I stared out the window at the white abyss beyond the porch. Every branch bowed under the weight of snow, some snapping with a crack that rattled through the cabin like a gunshot. "Could I really live with myself if I had?" I finally said, voice tight. "Would you?" She hesitated, eyes wide, seeing the edge she hadn't yet crossed. "No," she admitted softly, I wouldn't." I let the silence stretch. The moral weight of our past hung between us heavier than any storm. Evelyn had no idea how close she had come to dying on that mountain road. She'd survived by luck, and by my intervention. And yet, I couldn't just save her. I needed her to understand the cost of her actions 6 months ago. "Do you remember Apex Solutions? Quarterly launch 6 months ago?" I asked quietly, not looking at her. Her lips pressed together. The memory came instantly, sharp and bitter. She had been at the top, celebrating a product rollout while I was barely holding my daughter in a hospital bed. My exhaustion had been monumental. Her dismissal had been surgical, efficient, heartless. "Yes," she said finally, "I remember, but—" "You saw me as an inconvenience," I said, voice rising slightly, unearthing the old wound. "Emma was hospitalized with pneumonia, barely 6 years old, and all you saw was missed meetings. All you saw was my problem, standing in the way of productivity." She flinched. Her perfectly manicured hands gripped the edge of the blanket, knuckles white. I thought." "You thought what?" I pressed. "That my grief, my fear, my daughter's life could be ignored? That her suffering was secondary to quarterly numbers? That it was acceptable to fire me without considering the consequences?" She swallowed hard. I didn't understand." "No," I said firmly. "You understood perfectly. You just didn't care. You saw a vulnerability, and you exploited it to maintain control. That's what you do. That's who you were." Her eyes filled with tears, and finally, for the first time, I saw her fully unguarded. Evelyn Hart, CEO of a billion-dollar empire, stripped of corporate armor, confronted with the human consequences of her choices. "I didn't know," she whispered, voice barely audible. "I didn't know about Emma, about Sarah. I let her falter, because the truth was heavier than she could bear in words. I didn't just need an apology. I needed recognition. I needed her to see the person she had hurt. The daughter she had indirectly endangered. The father she had nearly destroyed. "She's all I have," I said softly, letting my voice break for the first time. "Since her mother died, cancer, 2 years ago, she's my world. And your arrogance, your boardroom detachment, made me feel like I had to choose between being a father and keeping my job. That's not a choice anyone should have to make." She pressed a hand to her mouth, silent, absorbing. Every fiber of her being had been trained to value profit. Numbers, results. And here, in my cabin, with snow piled high outside, she confronted something no algorithm could calculate. The cost of human life ignored. "I didn't know," she said again, voice trembling. I was wrong, completely wrong." I exhaled slowly, letting her words hang. "Acknowledging it is the first step," I said, "but words aren't enough, not anymore." Her gaze dropped to the floor. I understand." I leaned against the wall, letting my eyes sweep over her face. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not weaker, just human. And for the first time, I realized that fear, humility, and guilt could make a person more honest than any corporate negotiation ever had. The silence stretched. Then she spoke again, voice soft, almost a whisper. You saved me even though I hurt you." "Yes," I said simply. "And it wasn't a choice about you. It was about Emma. She would have asked why I let someone die when I could have helped. That's all the reason I need." Her lips parted slightly, surprise flickering across her features. The power dynamics had shifted. The boardroom hierarchy that had defined every interaction between us 6 months ago had collapsed. Now she depended on me entirely, not for approval, not for judgment, but for survival. "I don't deserve this," she said, voice cracking. "Not after everything." "No one deserves mercy," I said, "but sometimes survival demands it." Her shoulders slumped, surrendering in more than just body. She let the blankets drop around her like armor she didn't need anymore. She was Evelyn Hart, CEO, human, vulnerable, and completely exposed to the consequences of her choices. And I knew then that what happened next, the reconciliation, the apology, the possibility of change, wouldn't be easy. It would be messy, morally complex, and emotionally raw. But it would matter, because for the first time, she wasn't in a boardroom. She was human. And she had to face it. I turned toward the fire, and when I looked back, she was trembling, shivering, but alert. Her gaze met mine, and the question in her eyes was unspoken. Could she redeem herself? Could she prove that she had learned what her arrogance had blinded her to? Could she survive not just the storm outside, but the storm she had created inside someone else's life? The moral ultimatum had been delivered. The first emotional cliffhanger set. The mountain outside raged on, but inside, the real battle was about to begin. The morning light was faint through the snow-streaked windows, but Evelyn didn't notice it. Her focus was on the small figure that darted across the cabin floor, the reminder of everything she had dismissed in her boardroom calculations, everything she had ignored in her relentless climb. Emma, Daniel's daughter, the reason every choice I made now carried weight. I watched Evelyn stiffen when she noticed the child. The shock, the guilt, the recognition, it all painted across her face like some fragile confession. She understood, even before I spoke, that Emma's presence wasn't just a detail. It was the core of everything. She's wonderful," Evelyn whispered, almost to herself. Her voice broke in a way I hadn't heard since the storm, raw and honest. The vulnerability struck me more than the blizzard outside ever could. I motioned to the child. "Emma, go play. Breakfast is almost ready." Evelyn's gaze followed her, eyes wide. She's your world, isn't she?" "Yes," I said quietly. "She always has been." And when her mother, Sarah, died, everything changed. I had to be both parents. I had to survive, not just for me, but for her. Every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night, it's all for her. Evelyn swallowed, the tension coiling inside her chest. She had thought the stakes were corporate, boardroom wins, quarterly numbers, employee loyalty. But here, the stakes were primal. A child's survival, a father's integrity, the cost of indifference. Her voice was almost inaudible. I never realized. I never saw. You didn't want to, I replied, voice steady but heavy. You saw me as replaceable, disposable. Someone who could be dismissed, if inconvenient. That's not just a mistake. That's a moral failure. And yes, you were brilliant at your job, but you failed at humanity. She flinched at the word, failed. It hit harder than any fire or snow, more penetrating than any corporate reprimand. The shame and weight of it made her hands tremble as she clutched the blankets around her shoulders. I see it now, she admitted, voice small. I see the cost. I nodded. You're starting to, but understanding isn't enough. You have to act. The actions that follow are what will prove your intent. Words are cheap. Life is expensive. She looked down at the floor, guilt coiling into a physical ache in her chest. I need to fix it, not just with you, with everyone I've hurt. The employees, the people I fired unfairly. I didn't understand their lives. I didn't see them as human. I saw only outcomes, results. Exactly, I said, letting the affirmation cut through the lingering storm. You have to see people as whole beings. Not just numbers, not just resources, not just obstacles to your success. That's the difference between surviving and thriving. Between cruelty and compassion. She nodded, swallowing hard. I will, she said softly. I will make it right. I studied her, measuring her resolve. Redemption is rare. Real change even rarer. She had been forced to confront mortality, vulnerability, and the consequences of arrogance all at once. That crucible could either forge her or break her, and then her eyes flicked to a small object on the table, a child's drawing pinned to a rustic magnet on the refrigerator. Emma's tiny hand had scrawled a colorful rainbow over stick-figure parents and a house. It was simple, naive, and yet it carried more truth than any corporate report Evelyn had ever seen. She reached out, picking it up gently, like a sacred relic. She's brilliant, Evelyn murmured. You've given her so much. I didn't answer. Words weren't necessary. The drawing said it all. The care, the love, the resilience. Evelyn's hand lingered on the paper, and I saw a crack in her armor, a trace of humility that had never existed in the corner office of Apex Solutions. You see her, I said quietly, not as a distraction, not as an inconvenience, but as someone who matters. That's the lens you were missing 6 months ago. That's why your decisions caused pain. Her voice broke. I was wrong. I destroyed your life. And hers. I didn't even see it until now. Yes, I said, letting the word hang like a verdict. And recognizing it is just the beginning. You've spent 20 years building power. Now you have to rebuild compassion. It's harder. Quote. She nodded, tears forming in her eyes. I want to. I have to. I don't know if I can, but I have to try. Good, I said. Start by acknowledging every wrong, not just to me, but to everyone affected, not with grand speeches, not with PR statements. Face them, listen, understand the cost. Then act to repair it. Evelyn's chest rose and fell rapidly. She seemed smaller, lighter, yet charged with the enormity of what she had to do. And then she asked, voice barely above a whisper, Daniel, will you ever trust me again? I studied her face, noting the raw honesty, the vulnerability that no boardroom negotiation could simulate. Trust is earned, not given. Not yet, I said carefully, maybe never fully, but I can watch and see if your actions match your words. That's the only measure I have. You've been given the chance to prove it. The rest is up to you. She nodded slowly, committing to something far greater than any quarterly report. The moral weight of her decisions pressed into the cabin like the snow outside. Inescapable, relentless, and transformative. We didn't speak for a long moment. The fire crackled. Emma laughed softly in the background, and the storm's fury faded to a distant howl. Then Evelyn moved closer, eyes fixed on the drawing she still held. She gives me hope. she whispered. Even when I've done everything wrong, even when I almost destroyed someone's life, there's hope. Yes, I said quietly, there's always hope. But hope without action is meaningless. You need to prove it. Not just here, not just now, but every day. Consistently, without excuse. She drew in a breath, straightened her shoulders, and for the first time I saw not just guilt, not just fear, but resolve. I'll prove it, she said. Every day, to you, to her, to myself. I let her words settle, knowing the storm outside and the storm inside had shifted irrevocably. She had faced mortality, confronted her own failures, and now carried the weight of accountability willingly. That was the first real step. The cabin fell silent again. Emma played nearby, blissfully unaware of the philosophical reckoning happening a few feet away. The fire crackled, casting shadows that danced across the walls like ghosts of the past. Evelyn sat back, gripping the blankets, staring into the flames, and I knew she was already calculating the steps she needed to take. Therapy, apologies, corporate reforms, personal transformation. And I knew, too, that while the snowstorm outside would pass, the real test, whether she could truly change, was just beginning. The moral stakes were set. The emotional cliffhanger loomed. Survival had been secured. Redemption? That was a work in progress. Back in Seattle, the city felt sharper somehow. The streets gleamed with spring rain, reflecting the glass towers and the endless motion of business people. Evelyn stepped out of her modest sedan, feeling the weight of every decision ahead. 3 months of proof. 3 months to show Daniel that her epiphany wasn't just a fleeting moment born from fear. She walked past her usual cafes, the boutiques, the quiet hum of luxury, places she had once ruled like a queen of an empire. Today, all of it felt hollow. The storm on the mountain had stripped her of her illusions. Money didn't matter. Power didn't matter. Only actions did. The first order of business was apex itself. The boardroom felt like stepping back into an old skin, tight and uncomfortable. Executive portraits lined the walls, faces that had once inspired fear or respect, now just reminders of a system built on detachment. Evelyn straightened her shoulders. "Today we start differently," she said to the assembled VPs. Her voice carried more authority than fear, more vulnerability than arrogance. "We're changing how we measure success. Productivity is not the only metric. Humanity, empathy, connection, they count too." A murmur ran through the room. Resistance, curiosity, skepticism. She knew it would be harder than any deal she'd closed, but the moral clarity she'd gained on that mountain road didn't allow hesitation. "First," she continued, "we will overhaul parental leave policies. Fully paid leave, all genders, all caregivers. No exceptions. Anyone prevented from caring for a child due to work will have our support, not obstruction." The CFO's jaw tightened, but Evelyn ignored the warning look. "I've prepared the financial projections. The cost is significant, yes, but the return is loyalty, retention, and culture. Data supports this. We implement it, we do not compromise. Questions?" Silence. Then a hand raised. AVP, who had always prided himself on efficiency, cold pragmatism, said, "This is expensive. Morally, I get it. But the board." "I don't care what the board thinks," Evelyn said sharply. "We're leading differently. We're building Apex for the long term, not just the next quarterly report. If you want to stay, you lead with me. If not, you step aside." She paused, letting the weight of the ultimatum sink in. People shifted in their seats, some skeptical, others visibly stirred. She wasn't done. Not nearly. Next came the personal apologies. Evelyn spent hours on the phone, contacting employees she had wronged, dismissed, or pushed aside. Some refused to speak. Some agreed cautiously, suspicious of her sincerity. Each conversation was a trial by fire. "Evelyn," one former manager said flatly, "you fired me during a family crisis. You didn't care. Why should I believe you care now?" "I don't expect blind trust," Evelyn admitted, "but I can show you through my actions that I've learned the cost of what I did. I can start by acknowledging it, personally. No shortcuts, no corporate statements. Just me, saying what I should have said years ago. Some conversations ended with tentative forgiveness, others with silence, and a few with sharp words that cut like knives. But each one revealed the depth of the damage she had caused, and the depth of her own need to be different. At home, evenings were spent with therapy. Dr. Sarah Chen was relentless. "You can't intellectualize this," she said during one session. "You can't strategize your way out of guilt. You have to feel it. Every choice, every act of neglect, every dismissal, it's in you, and it won't leave until you acknowledge it." Quote, Evelyn cried like she hadn't in years, uncovering memories of foster care, of abandonment, of a young girl learning that survival required ruthlessness. The CEO persona had protected her for decades, but now it had to be dismantled, layer by layer. Daniel's presence hovered in the background of her mind constantly. His words, the look in his eyes that night on the mountain porch, and Emma's innocent resilience drove her daily. Every decision at Apex was now filtered through that lens. Would Daniel approve? Would Emma benefit? Could anyone be hurt less by my actions? 3 weeks in, the first signs of change became visible. Employees whispered about the new parental leave, about managers being accountable for humanity as well as performance. Collaboration replaced competition in small pockets. The culture was shifting, slowly, unevenly, but undeniably. Evelyn kept a private journal, detailing each step, each apology, each reform. She imagined Daniel reading it one day, judging, watching, weighing her sincerity. She wanted to prove to him, not just say it, that she had changed, that the woman who had fired him without thought could now build systems that protected families, respected humanity, and valued connection above mere efficiency. Then came the hardest part, rebuilding trust with Daniel directly. She drove back to the mountains one cool April morning, anxiety coiling through her chest. The roads were clear now, a spring thaw revealing the landscape in fresh clarity. She parked her sedan at the familiar bend, her stomach twisting. Inside the cabin, she could hear laughter, the unmistakable sound of Emma. The porch seemed smaller than she remembered, warmer and light, but every step toward the door felt like walking into a judgment chamber. She hesitated, then knocked. Her heart hammered in her chest. Daniel appeared instantly, holding Emma's hand. His expression was neutral, unreadable. The child looked at Evelyn with curiosity, perhaps sensing something had changed, but not fully understanding. "Hi," Evelyn said, voice soft but steady. I've come back, like I promised, to show you that I'm serious, that I've changed." Quote. Daniel's eyes didn't move from hers. "Have you?" he asked quietly, measuring every word, every micro-expression. "I have," she said, and for the first time, she let herself mean it fully. "Not just for you, not just for Emma, but for everyone I've hurt. Every action, every decision, I've been working on it. I've restructured policies, apologized personally, started therapy, and I'm rebuilding Apex from the ground up to value people, not just profit." He considered her, silent, arms crossed. "And the board? The executives? Did you manage to convince them?" Quote. "Yes," she said firmly. "It wasn't easy, but I've taken the first steps. Policies are in place, apologies underway. The culture is shifting. But I know that words alone aren't enough. You said that, so I'm asking you to watch, evaluate, see if I've truly changed over the next months." Daniel's gaze softened slightly, not entirely, but enough to hint at the possibility. Emma tugged on his sleeve, chattering about school projects, drawing, the small triumphs of childhood. Evelyn watched, the realization striking her again. Life, connection, and human care were the things she'd ignored in pursuit of corporate success. "I'm ready," she said softly, almost to herself, "to do what's necessary, to prove it." Daniel studied her, weighing, testing, calculating, but this time not as a corporate adversary, not as a father fighting for survival, but as a man measuring sincerity. "Then we begin," he said finally, voice calm, controlled. "But remember, change is sustained, not immediate. Words don't build trust. Actions do." Evelyn nodded, the weight in her chest shifting from guilt to determination. She had faced mortality, confronted her failures, and now stepped into the real test, the long, grueling work of proving her transformation was genuine. The storm outside had passed months ago, but the storm within Evelyn, the trial of conscience, empathy, and courage, had only just begun. And for the first time in years, she felt ready. Weeks passed, and the cabin visits became a ritual. Every Thursday, Evelyn drove the familiar route through the mountains, each mile a reminder of how far she had fallen and how far she had to climb. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of thawing earth and pine, but it did nothing to soothe the knot of anxiety that twisted in her chest. Daniel waited on the porch each time, Emma running ahead and disappearing inside the cabin before she even waved. Daniel didn't greet her with warmth. That wasn't his way. His eyes, steady and critical, studied her like a ledger, weighing intent and action, noting hesitation or overconfidence. Evelyn learned quickly to keep her excuses to herself. Excuses were currency she no longer possessed. Inside, the cabin was quiet but alive. Emma's drawings adorned the walls, little reminders that love and care were not abstract concepts. They were lived, messy, tangible things. Evelyn felt a pang every time she saw them. They were proof of what she had ignored before, what she had dismissed, what she had cost Daniel and his daughter. She cleared her throat. "Breakfast?" she offered, holding the tray she'd prepared. Eggs, toast, fresh fruit. Not extravagant, not impressive, but made with care, with attention, with intent. Daniel took the tray, placing it on the table without a word. Emma, perched on a chair, looked at Evelyn curiously, sizing her up. Evelyn knelt beside her. "Want to help me with the fruit?" she asked softly. The child's eyes widened. A small nod, hesitant but trusting. For a moment, Evelyn realized she had never done anything so simple that had nothing to do with profit margins, KPIs, or strategic advantage. She felt exposed, human, vulnerable, and a strange thrill ran through her. This was the action that words could never convey. She was proving her humanity. After breakfast, Daniel watched silently as she cleared the table, washed dishes by hand, and moved with purposeful calm through the cabin. It was a test in patience and consistency, and he observed every detail, every movement, every hesitation, every choice mattered more than any policy change in Seattle. "You're different," he said finally, quiet, measured, not the words, the presence. "You carry yourself differently. It's noticeable." Evelyn's stomach tightened. Was it praise, observation, or judgment? "I'm trying," she admitted. "Every day, every decision. I've restructured Apex, apologized personally, begun therapy. But I know that it's not enough. The work, this, what I do here, it's the beginning." He nodded, letting the comment hang. Actions, not words. That's what matters. It's not a week, a month, or 3 months. Change is sustained, Evelyn. You've shown intent. Now, show consistency. The child tugged at her hand, holding up a colored pencil. "Can you draw with me?" Emma asked. Evelyn laughed softly. "Of course." For the next hour, she sat cross-legged on the floor, coloring alongside a 7-year-old girl whose life had already known pain and resilience in equal measure. Emma talked incessantly, questions about the world, complaints about homework, stories about friends. Evelyn listened, truly listened, without judgment, without interruption, without the need to prove herself. Daniel leaned against the wall, arms crossed, observing quietly. He didn't intervene, he didn't need to. Watching Evelyn engage with his daughter, invest time and attention without calculation or expectation, was perhaps the clearest proof he could receive of her transformation. Later, they stepped outside. The snow was melted into soft, slushy paths, the mountains rising stark and beautiful against a pale sky. Evelyn trudged alongside Daniel, boots squelching in mud, the child skipping ahead. "You've made a lot of changes," Daniel said, voice neutral. "I've heard from employees. The parental leave policy is in effect. Flexible schedules are being honored. Executives are shifting. New hires are coming in." But culture isn't a policy. It's a living thing, and it's fragile. One misstep, and it collapses. I know, she said, breath visible in the cool air. That's why I'm committed. Not just in policy, not just for show. I've apologized personally. And I'm rebuilding Apex to be a place where people matter beyond their work output. I want to prove it, not just say it. Daniel nodded. Good, that's the start. But trust isn't given, it's earned. Every day, without exception. Evelyn felt the weight of the words. Trust, real trust, was a mountain higher than any peak she had scaled in Seattle, higher than any boardroom triumph. And here she was, still vulnerable, still accountable, still aware that every day could undo the progress she had fought to make. They returned inside, and Evelyn helped Emma with a puzzle. Pieces scattered across the floor, colors clashing, tiny hands fumbling. Daniel watched, sipping coffee quietly, and Evelyn noticed the subtle tension in his posture. He was judging not just her actions, but her patience, her intent, her consistency. Hours passed in small, mundane ways. Cooking, cleaning, laughing with Emma, observing, correcting, guiding. Evelyn realized that this was the real work, the domestic, the human, the relational, the work that no boardroom, no spreadsheet, no corporate strategy could teach her. When night fell, they sat by the fire. Emma slept in the small guest room, exhausted. Evelyn curled up on the couch, wrapped in quilts, the warmth of the fire soaking into her bones. Daniel remained in his armchair, silent but present. You've changed, he said softly, breaking the silence. But remember this, change is tested in moments that don't feel significant. Every interaction, every choice, every small act matters more than any grand gesture. That's the real test of your transformation. I understand, she whispered. And I'm ready. I'll prove it. Daniel's gaze softened slightly, not entirely, but enough to hint that he saw the sincerity in her eyes. Then continue. And don't rely on emotion or fear to guide you. Let integrity and consistency be your compass. Evelyn nodded, her resolve firm. This was no longer about impressing Daniel or even reclaiming trust. It was about being the person she should have been all along. The storm on the mountain had ended, but the storm within her, the challenge of reconciling her past with who she wanted to become, had only just begun. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the cabin held quiet warmth, a small refuge from the weight of past failures and future responsibilities. And for the first time, Evelyn understood what it meant to be human. Not invulnerable, not all-powerful, but present, accountable, and capable of real change. She drifted to sleep that night with a strange calm, knowing that tomorrow would demand more, that every day would be a test, that redemption was not a moment, it was a lifetime of proof. The morning sun fell pale and golden across the cabin, illuminating the snow-covered mountains with a soft, almost reverent light. Evelyn woke first, the quilt still wrapped tightly around her shoulders. The fire had died down to glowing embers, and the quiet was absolute, except for the distant chirp of birds and the faint creak of the cabin settling. She sat up slowly, letting the calmness settle in. 3 months of sustained effort had brought her here, not just in policy changes at Apex, not just through therapy, apologies, and reflection, but in the quiet moments like this, where she could see the world and herself clearly, where she understood the weight of what she had done, and the effort it took to rebuild what she had broken. Daniel emerged from the bedroom holding a mug of coffee in his hands. He looked the same, steady, measured, but something in his eyes hinted at approval, at acknowledgement of the work she had put in. Morning, he said simply. No judgment, no testing, just presence. Morning, Evelyn replied softly. She moved to stand by the window, watching the snow melt in rivulets down the roof. It's beautiful. Yes, Daniel said, setting the mug on the table, and fragile. Just like progress. Evelyn turned to him, and the gravity of the moment hit her. This was it. The culmination of 3 months of change, proof of sincerity, the point where words met consequence. Daniel, she said carefully, I came here today to show you that I can do more than talk, that I can follow through, that Apex, and every life affected by my choices, can be treated with humanity, care, and respect. And I've started." He nodded. "I've seen it. Policies implemented, apologies made, therapy attended, culture shifting, small but real. Your commitment is clear, but I need to hear something more, something personal, not from reports, not from employees, directly from you." Evelyn's chest tightened. "I understand. What do you need to hear?" "Truth," he said quietly, "about who you are now, about who you want to be, about what you've learned." She drew a deep breath. "I've learned that success without humanity is hollow, that control without empathy is empty, that every action has a consequence, and people, not profit, must come first. I've learned that I was afraid of being vulnerable, afraid of needing people, and I built walls instead of connections. And I want to change that. I want to be the kind of leader, the kind of person who values life over leverage, relationships over reports, care over control." Daniel's expression softened slightly. Not a smile, not forgiveness, but recognition. "And you will sustain that? Not because of fear or near-death clarity or me watching, but because it's real?" "I will," she said, eyes steady. "Every day, not perfectly, but consistently. Because I choose it, because it's right, because the alternative is unacceptable, and because I've seen the consequences of not choosing it, the lives I've hurt, the trust I've broken, the fear I've caused." He studied her silently, weighing every word, every intention. The cabin was quiet, the light gentle, the air filled with the faint scent of burning wood. Emma appeared behind him, clutching a small drawing. She held it out to Evelyn, a picture of the cabin, of trees, of mountains, of Daniel and herself. "For you," she said shyly. Evelyn took the paper, tears pricking her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "It's beautiful." She looked at Daniel. "This is the life I want to value. This is the legacy I want to leave." Daniel exhaled slowly. "Then I think we can move forward. Carefully, slowly. But there's no going back. Not to the old Apex, not to the old you. Only forward. Together if you prove yourself every day." "I will," Evelyn said firmly. "I'll prove it, and I'll keep proving it. Not for recognition, not for redemption, not for you, but because it matters, and because it's the only way to be the person I should have been all along." He nodded once. "Then we begin." The rest of the morning passed in quiet action. Simple routines, shared tasks, laughter that came naturally, not forced. Evelyn helped Emma with a small project, Daniel guided from the side, and the cabin felt alive in a way the penthouse and boardroom never had. These were the moments that mattered. The moments she had been blind to for decades. When it was time for Evelyn to leave, she gathered her things, carefully folding the blankets, ensuring the cabin remained as welcoming as it had been for her. She hugged Emma tightly. "Keep being brave," she whispered, "and never stop asking questions." Emma grinned. "I won't." Daniel came to the porch, watching her. Evelyn stepped down into the soft spring snow. She looked up at him. "Thank you for everything, for giving me a chance, for showing me what it means to be human. I won't waste it." He nodded, arms crossed against the chill, a faint warmth in his expression. "I'll be watching," he said simply. "Don't disappoint me." "I won't," she promised, voice steady. "Not ever again." As she climbed into her sedan, the spring air sharp in her lungs, Evelyn felt a clarity she had never known. This was more than survival. This was transformation. Not a moment, not a gesture, not a crisis, but a commitment, sustained and intentional, to being the person she had always wanted to be. She glanced at the cabin one last time. Daniel and Emma framed in the doorway, the mountains stretching beyond, the snow glistening in sunlight, and understood something fundamental. Change is real when it's acted upon, not just felt. Trust is earned not once, but every day, and some promises do not have expiration dates. She started the car and drove away, the city and Apex waiting, but for the first time she carried something more important than deadlines or deals: purpose, connection, and the knowledge that she could choose humanity over ambition, compassion over control, every single day. And Daniel watched her go, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his face. He had tested her, observed her, and finally he believed. Not in words, not in promises, but in action. Outside, the mountains stood silent and steady, as if witnessing the birth of something enduring. Evelyn Hart had survived the storm, not just of nature, but of herself, and she was no longer afraid of who she could become.